for the amenities we enjoy here in the church and at our homes. We're grateful for all that we have been blessed with. We recognize that as tremendous blessings in our lives. We're grateful for our families. We're grateful for our Savior, for Jesus, his atoning sacrifice for us, and all he has done for us. We pray that thy Spirit will attend us now during these presentations. We pray for these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, so my name is Laura Bybee, and I am an amateur gardener. I have been gardening for about 25 years, and my technique is to put the seeds in the ground, add water, and then weed. So that's all my expertise. So hopefully we have some experienced gardeners here who can help add to this presentation. Before I go any further, Nathan, how long do I have again?
20 to 25.
Okay, perfect. All right, so I was instructed that to tailor my remarks to the brand new gardener. So is there anyone who has never gardened before? Oh, great, sort of, we have a few. Have there been some that maybe have gardened maybe 5 years? A few 5 years? Are there some 50 years out there been gardening a long time? Excellent, you should give this presentation. Okay, so when we think of gardening, this is the image that always comes to mind. It looks beautiful, it's organized, there's beautiful rows, it looks like it's easy to pick the fruits and veggies, and there's no weeds in sight. This is my experience. I plant the seeds, and then somehow the power of the weed is unleashed as soon as those seeds go in the ground. And before I know it, it looks like this untamable mess. And so tonight, I want to share with you a few ideas for the beginning gardener of how we can tame the power of the weed, okay? So, two different presentations, okay. So here's the 3 things that we're going to focus on really quickly, and then really I want to open it up to what questions you might have, and then as a group, hopefully answer those questions. The first thing when considering gardening is why? What's your purpose? Why do you want to garden? The second thing to consider is how much time you have to spend gardening. And the third is, what is a space do I need for that garden? Okay, so number 1, purpose of gardening. Are you wanting to teach your kids how to work? Is that the reason why you're gardening? Is it a new hobby or skill that you're wanting to teach? Are you wanting to become self-reliant and save your food for long-term storage? Are you just wanting to eat fresh produce to become healthier and not worry about pesticides and all those things that might come from our food source? Or are you just trying to follow the profit? For a long time, my husband thought that's why we planted a garden, was just because we were following the profit. And I was like, actually, I grew a garden because I like to. I find a lot of joy in watching things grow. And I have some OCD tendencies, and so I really like it when Google Earth goes over my house and takes a photo, and I can see straight rows and dirt between the straight rows. So that second picture of the weeds, I like it when that's not on Google Earth. So those are my reasonings for gardening. And also for many, many years, we have canned everything that comes out of our garden. So it's been an added bonus to our family to just go down into the freezer, grab corn, and it tastes just like we harvested it. So those are some of my reasons. What are some of your reasons for gardening? For those who are newcomers, is there a reason why you want to learn how to garden?
It always tastes better fresh.
It tastes better fresh. You know, you can buy a tomato from the store, and it's not the same as a tomato right out of your garden. There's just something different. Same with the peach. Peaches taste like cotton candy when they're fresh off your tree, but they don't taste like that from Walmart.
I think I just always loved it seems magical if I can walk outside and grab an nectarine off a tree.
Yeah.
And just eat right there. I don't have to go anywhere else. You just walk out, get it there. I don't know. Just like how it feels.
Yeah, I agree. For our granddaughter, she likes to walk out by the swing set and voila, there's raspberries magically appear. And she just eats them right off the bushes. She loves that. Those who have gardened for a really long time, why do you garden? All of those reasons.
It's to work. My husband,
Sorry, we're recording it, so it picks up better.
to learn the skill of it in the beginning, mowing the profit, being self-reliant. We love fresh food.
Yeah.
It's all
Exactly. So I grew up on a dairy farm, and so I learned how to work hard from a young age. And then when Ryan and I got married and we moved into Ammon, the dairy farm just didn't fit in our lifestyle, did it, right? Nor did we want it to. And so I wanted a way to teach our kids how to work. And going out and weeding taught them how to work. And that things don't just come because I have money. It's because we have to put in effort. So those are a few reasons to consider if you're new to gardening, like why do you want to do this? Because that will shape what your garden will look like. Okay, the second thing to consider when new to gardening is how much time you have in a day. Okay, here's the requirements that a garden takes for your time. First of all, you've got to consider preparing a garden space. If you want to have boxes, are you going to build those boxes? How much time does it take to build those boxes? Bring in the soil to add to those boxes. Maybe you have a flat piece of ground and you need to till the soil, prepare it, it needs to be loose. How much time do you have to till? Or if you don't own a tiller, then that means you're doing it manually with a shovel. Do you have time to do that with a shovel? Or maybe your garden is like mine at the moment and is lacking some nutrients. So we need to prepare the soil so it's ready for seeds. It has the nutrients there. Planting a garden. Our garden is 32 feet wide by 64 feet long. It takes me an entire day to plant that garden. So if you don't have an entire day, you might not want a 32 by 64 garden. You might want something smaller. Watering. How much time do you have to water? Gardens take a lot of water. Depending on what you choose to grow, some things like corn, potatoes take a lot of water. Some things like squashes take less water. So thinking about your water commitment. And then of course, how much time do you have to weed? Because you'll weed, and you'll weed, and you'll weed. It's a never-ending thing, clear through harvest. And then of course we have harvest time. And that's why we're gardening, right? Is to get that fresh fruit, to enjoy it. Depending on what you choose to plant, harvest could look daily, especially if you plant a zucchini, because I don't know how those things do it, but they went from flower to 3 feet long in 24 hours. So you need to pick those daily. Beans, things like beans or raspberries, things like that, they're about an every 2 to 3 day harvest. And then you have things like corn that is really harvest all in one day because that's how it's coming in. And then of course here in Idaho, if we get that hard frost in September, October, that means you're harvesting everything you have left in 3 hours. So to think about what your time commitment is. So now that we know what our purpose is, I'm thinking I have 10 minutes a day, I have an hour a day, I have all day long to garden, now dictates how big of a garden you can do. So that kind of goes on how if you only have 10 minutes a day to focus on a garden, I would consider doing garden boxes. And those are usually no wider than 4 feet because you want to be able to reach into the middle really easily, but they can be as long as you want them to be. A lot of people usually do probably about 8 feet because that's what boards usually come in. So thinking of your space is the placement. A garden needs 6 to 8 hours of sunlight. So you don't want to plant it by some shade trees. Now, Ryan and I have this great problem. We planted our garden when our neighbor's trees were really small. It's now been 15 years and those trees are much taller. And we're finding that we're missing a lot of the morning sun, and so we're relying mostly on the afternoon sun. So consider that when you're gardening, like if I'm going to place it by trees, that you recognize how tall those trees are going to be. I had a friend who planted their garden behind their shed and along a fence. And so that was a great fun place because it got warm, but then it turned out it was too warm. And it ended up burning all their plants when July came around because it got too hot. So consider those placements. You want plenty of sun, but not a place where it's going to get too hot. And you don't want to put it in a wind tunnel. So in Idaho, of course, we know the wind's going to blow, but you notice that there's certain areas around your home where the wind might blow more, maybe between two homes. If you don't have a fence, it might funnel the wind through there. You want to avoid that spot because then that might burn your leaves, and it's just harder to keep moist if it's in a wind tunnel. And then also consider what your family wants to eat. Those are things, you don't want to plant things that you're not going to eat. One year we decided to plant broccoli. My family does like to eat broccoli, so I thought this would be a great thing to plant. However, I didn't realize that broccoli also attracts bugs, and they like to lay their eggs in your broccoli. And so I harvested my broccoli, put it in the pot to blanch it, and I saw little green worms float to the top. And that's the last time I planted broccoli. I just can't do green worms in my food. So there's certain things to kind of consider that way. Okay, so those are the three things I only wanted to share with new gardeners. And so because gardening can go in a wide range of questions, from soil preparation to what should I plant, I decided it might be better to open up to questions that you guys might have on gardening. And if no one has questions, then the tree guys can have a lot of time. So what questions do you have as a new gardener?
I got a question.
Sure.
So we just moved here recently from Arizona.
Yeah.
You were talking about the 24/7 and they're not up here.
No.
When's the safe date to
That's
throw cold weather?
plants in like
I-
peas
yeah,
and
yeah.
cabbage and things like that. That's a great question. Yes.
So, you know where Tater Mountain is? Out here to the east. When the snow's off Tater Mountain, plant.
Not this year, there's no snow now.
Okay, Bryce. So
Dixie, that is a normally yes.
that is a really great question about when to plant in eastern Idaho. And the answer really is it can vary. Now, I know they say that carrots, peas, cabbage, your cold weather plants can be planted in March. My experience is that we have bipolar weather, and there's a chance your seeds will rot in the ground because it's too cold. I like to wait till the soil warms up a little bit, and so I will wait for those cold weather things until about April, just because the soil has to be a certain temperature in order to get seeds to germinate.
So what is that temperature? 55 degrees?
55,
55?
yeah. And so this year, our soil's probably been closer to 40 degree all winter long, so we think we'd plant earlier, but it all depends. We could get this rainy season through March, and then even though there's no snow in the mountains, it's not a great time to plant those things, just because the seeds may rot. It's just a warning, they may rot. Some do, some don't.
So cutting to the chase, what about tomatoes?
Tomatoes, that's a great question. I don't plant them till May, and the reason why is our last frost in eastern Idaho usually comes about the middle of May, and then you're safe. You might have a time or two where you have to still cover, but in my experience here, I can plant outdoor. Now, if you have a greenhouse, you can plant earlier. You can plant right now. I think you guys have tomatoes growing. And then what I do is there's these, they're called wall of waters, or some kind of a tent that you can put over your tomatoes. And once my tomato outgrows that, I'll open it up so it can still let the heat out, but keep heat in to help it grow. I'll keep it on till about the 4th of July, just to keep the heat going, because I find from my garden, it grows better. Now, I'm gonna put a caveat on that. I live in Cottonwood Hills. I swear I live in a hole, because nowhere else in Ammon will get a frost but my house.
No, mine does too.
Yours, it's Cottonwood Hills, it has a frost. We funnel down and we always get a frost. So I keep my wall of waters like a mini greenhouse around those tomatoes for as long as I can. Just so that they keep the heat, they'll do better in heat. I've seen people in eastern Idaho take old windows and almost make like a little greenhouse around their tomatoes. Do you have
I do have a question.
Yeah.
If you have a new area
hold on, they have a,
if you have a new area that you're gonna plant a garden, is it, and it's in the ground, is it better to take the soil is horrible right now. Is it better to take the soil out and put new stuff in, or augment it with others?
Because we've tried it twice to augment it.
Great question. So I've always augmented. I've always added either a soil pep type product, which is kind of like a chewed up bark almost, or I've added in compost, or even like steer manure or horse manure and stuff like that into the soil to help build it up. When I first moved to Ammon back in 2000, I was out on a walk in Centennial Ranch off of 17th Street. And I saw this beautiful garden. And I stopped the lady and I said, "Your garden is gorgeous. What's your secret?" And she said to me, "I have 100-year-old dirt." And I had to stop and think about that, because I'm thinking, well, I have like 2,000-year-old dirt over here, so shouldn't that be better? But I think she was saying she removed her soil and brought in, quote unquote, younger soil that had more nutrients in it. But I think you can put it in. Now, from what I understand, it takes time to develop healthy soil. So it just might be you're in that waiting phase where you keep adding, and over time that will continue to break down. I have heard of some people adding in something called humates that will help break down things that are in the soil to help lighten it. So if you put in any additive like manure or soil pep, the humates can help break that into finer particles. But great question. Yeah, Ryan?
I just want to clarify on the soil temperature. Your seeds will actually germinate in the 45 to 50 degree range, but that soil temperature has to hit 55 degrees in the day consistently for it to keep growing, or it ends up losing all the nutrients out of the seed before the plant will grow.
And that's the first 6 to 8 inches or how deep into the ground.
Just how deep your seed is. Most of your seeds, unless you're doing like potatoes or root vegetables, your potatoes are going to go in about 8 inches deep. And carrots, everything else, you're only maybe 2 inches.
Yes.
I just wanted to say, a lot of new homes going in around here, and if you're building a home, watch where the concrete mixture cleans out, and you don't want to plant your garden there. So that would be a really bad place to plant your garden, and they do that. They go out in the back and rinse out their truck and everything,
Yeah.
and that goes into your soil.
It's a very good point, very good point. What we didn't know when we built our house, well, it was being built and our next door neighbors brought in some bark to put around their plants and their shrubbery. What I didn't know until after we planted our garden was that bark was treated with a herbicide, so it would let weeds come up. We had a perfect circle for a while in our garden that would not grow. Because of that, what was left was still leaching up. So it is a good thing to think about. Like if you're building a home, where are they cleaning things out? Where is the water draining to? Because you don't want to plant your garden where your water's going to puddle either, because you don't want soggy soil all of the time. Do you have a question?
I actually had a comment about the amending versus bringing in new soil. I actually built several garden boxes, been a couple years now, and I filled them. Sunnyside Gardens has a mix called half quarter that has done wonders in my garden. I haven't had to do a whole lot for the last couple of years. It's growing great. So just an idea that's in the budget.
Yeah. So there are lots of options out there. In fact, if you do a garden box, you will find your first several years, because you have that type of soil in there, it's going to flourish. It's going to grow fantastic because it has lots of nutrients. And as you start to see your garden not producing or performing the way you desire, then you know that your nutrient levels are going down and not being replaced. Yes, let's see. Back row.
So
Hold on.
I'm there.
They gotta microphone you.
I'm there in the, hey, we got these awesome garden beds with awesome soil and they're starting to like, and so I'm wondering like how often and what do you use? Cause I mean, we've done like soil prep and like the compost and whatever in them, and I feel like I never know what I'm lacking.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, great question. So if you have berries of any sort, you are probably going to need to add iron every spring. And you'll know when your leaves turn a yellow color that they're anemic. And so every spring before, like right as the leaves are budding, that's when you want to put out iron in your raspberries or any kind of berry you have. And then right after the leaves begin to grow, you would want to fertilize with something that probably has high nitrogen, high phosphorus, something like that. And then for your main garden, I just know that when mine is not performing, like my plants aren't as thick and healthy as they should be, maybe my yield is down, that's when I know that I'm depleting too much. And so add it in the fall. If you're going to do any kind of compost, add it in the fall so it has the whole winter to break down. And then in the spring, you can add, what is it, Brian? Nitrogen.
Simplot makes a garden fertilizer that has specific nutrients for the soil around here. It works really well. It's just a general thing that's high in nitrogen. We don't have a lot of nitrogen here. And in Ammon, there's a reason they used to build bricks out here, because the clay soil is really hard. If you're not doing garden boxes, you need to add some sand, some peat moss, things like that to keep the soil loose, more of a loam soil, because the clay will pack around, and the clay does not hold a lot of nutrients very well. Then you just get a general garden fertilizer that's high in nitrogen for the most.
So once you apply that nitrogen, what you're going to see, it's just like your lawn. When you put fertilizer on your lawn, it's usually high nitrogen, it's gonna grow like mad. So you're gonna see a lot of leafy green, and you may not see a lot of produce. So you balance that nitrogen well. If you're getting a lot of green leaves and you're not getting any tomatoes forming or cucumbers or things like that, then know that you've over-fertilized. So something interesting I did learn last year is, for whatever reason, bees had a hard time pollinating my cucumbers. So I learned how to self-pollinate, which was really interesting. But if you're gonna self-pollinate, only do a couple flowers every other day. I did them all in one day, which meant I had all the cucumbers come on at the same time. That was a bad mistake. So just every so many days, go out and self-pollinate. Yes. Oh, microphone.
I'm not a professional gardener by any means, but I found this fertilizer and I swear by it. It's 1,000 times better than any fertilizer I've ever found. It's called Bittler's Magic, made by Anderson's.
Okay.
Bitlighter. It's like unbelievable. You can read studies about it. They did it in Harvard and whatnot. They did outproduced anything. But since I found that stuff, man, I haven't worried quite as much about my soil. Everything just blows up.
So where did you find that product?
Sunnyside.
Sunnyside Gardens has it? Okay.
I ordered my stuff.
You could order it through a website, but
Okay.
they
Those
have the same thing.
bags, like pallets, a little bit on plant. We can add some.
Okay, that's fantastic. Thanks for the suggestion. I might look at that because my garden could use a little something extra this year. Okay.
We actually took a Midlighter class I did here in Ammon 15, 18 years ago, and that's what we use. And we've had good gardens. We aren't consistent at it, but we just started again. We moved too many times, but so we use Midlighter with the planter boxes out with his. And I have a book on it. If anyone's interested, I'll sell it to you for the right price. I'm just kidding. But you could look at it or whatever. But it gives the combination for the soil and then the combination for the fertilizer. Do you guys use that too?
Okay.
You mix up the magic balls or whatever they're called with 16, 16, 16, and it's like a 50-pound bag, and it's like 2 of these, and then you add it actually in your soil every week, like once a week.
Oh, perfect.
It's a weekly feed, and then there's a
Is it like a granular
just a granule, and there's a certain amount you put on for square footage. It's like a half an ounce per foot, and so I've got 30-foot long beds, and I just sprinkle the whole thing down.
So Midlanders is not actually fertilizer.
No, it's a system. It's a gardening.
Medium that you're mixing your 16 and they give you the rates based on soil analysis in terms of your silt, clay, and how do you?
He gives you the soil, so you get their soil compost, which is, there's different compost, sand, vermiculite, whatever.
That's what you get.
That's what you do, and then you buy his fertilizer system. I could, maybe we need to connect and we can.
Like you look at the book
Fantastic.
or whatever.
Yes.
Just like this is one.
This makes me smile. Just offering, you know, we have livestock, and so they have a byproduct that we have an abundance of, and that's what we use on our garden. We have used other things at times, but this works well for what we planted. And the only thing is that I can absolutely guarantee it is not weed free.
Right.
The weed seeds are recycled with the other items.
Yes. This is usually any kind of manure, usually it has weeds in it.
Sorry, I'm stepping into your
Oh,
presentation.
no, please do.
So yeah, if you have manure from cows, horses, goats, whatever, they don't digest the seed. But if you can get a hold of some llama manure, llamas digest the whole seed, and there's a couple different ways you can apply that. You can apply it by making a tea out of it, where you soak the little pellets, and it'll pull all the nutrients out. Or you can just apply it directly in the pellet droppings right to your garden. So llamas digest everything. You won't get weeds come up with it.
You make a tea?
You can make a tea.
Is that a
Don't drink it.
Are there llama farms around here that you know of?
The largest llama ranch in the world is out on the Ryrie Highway.
Ryrie Highway. Okay, you've probably all seen it.
So, well, the whole idea of gardening is really to bring you joy. That's why God created gardens, is so that we can eat healthy, so that we can be self-sufficient, and that we can learn to work. I love that the very first commandment given to Adam after he leaves his garden is to work. By the sweat of thy brow thou shalt eat all the days of thy life. So I love that. I love that gardens teach us how to work, and we can appreciate the effort God has given us, or the things God has given us as we garden and labor in a garden. And so I hope you enjoy your experience this coming summer, and hopefully it's successful and you find lots of tasty food to eat. Thank you.
One more thing, go ahead.
Oh,
One more comment. So I've been gardening for years, and just remember as you try it, there's failure after failure. I don't know, I don't have any of the right answers, but and I will back up what Sister Boyle said. There's nothing that replaces good old manure. I was raised on a dairy farm, but the thing you gotta remember about it, weeds. The weeds really grow in it, but so does everything else. So, I mean, just like we have that heavy clay in Ammon, if you mix a lot of manure in it, it really helps so it doesn't cake together and all those things. And so, anyway, I don't know anything else I can tell you, but just keep trying. You're gonna fail and succeed. You'll have both.
I just need to put this out to anybody. I got pretty good at buying plants from Sunnyside Gardens and putting them in my garden and making them grow. I got ambitious when we built our house up here and decided I want to start starting my own seeds and doing that. We put the lights in on all of our cabinets, the grow lights under all of our cabinets and stuff. And I'm really bad at it, and I don't know why, but every time I do a plant that I start in my house and I plant it in the yard, it dies. And so it's like months of work that I just watch go poof. And so if anybody has any tips about seed starting in your house, talk to me after.
I will say something about that. So I have a greenhouse and it works wonderful, but if you start a seed in the greenhouse or in your house, either one, and then you all of a sudden you take it outside, it really hurts it because it's not used to. Yeah, you have to kind of put it out for a day and bring it back, and put it out for a day and bring it back. Okay, I'm sorry. Usually that helps. Sometimes that helps. You know.
Okay, thank you, Sister Bybee. She said she wasn't a professional, but she knows a lot, so thank you. But just a reminder, we're here we're all beginners. We may have some have more expertise than others. We're all just learning together, and that's really all these classes are meant to be, thought starters. If you labor all your days and you save but one soul, in our mind, we started these classes. If you labor all your days and you get one more person to garden, or one more person to go buy a radio, or one more person to have water storage, these are successful classes. So that's our goal here. Thank you, Sister Bybee. Thank you, Lord.
All right, so I guess it's my turn, and I hope this stays on. For those of you who know Bob Potter, I am not Bob Potter. So he is out of town, and he would have liked to have been here, but he called me 3 days ago and said, hey, can you come talk and tell people how to prune? And he gave me his nice slideshow, and this slideshow is designed to go for an hour. I won't hold you to that. So we'll get through. Some of it I'll go past. But my name is Justin Jepson. I'm a certified arborist. I've worked for Advantage Tree Care for the last 6 years. So I've been doing a lot with trees. When I first started, I thought, I know how to run chainsaws. I'll go cut trees down. It'll be easy. It'll be fun. And it can be fun, but it is not easy. And so kind of talking to you guys about pruning trees, I'm assuming a lot of you have fruit trees. You guys probably have ornamental trees that flower and are pretty, and shade trees. Those are kind of the three main types of trees most people have. So we'll get into this, and we always tell people don't try this at home. You definitely don't want to jump on a trampoline or be up on weird ladders that you've kind of made. We actually climb, we pull out the harnesses, put ropes in trees. I would rather tie myself to a tree than be on a ladder any day of the week, because if you've ever seen YouTube, there are hours and hours and hours of videos of people on ladders having bad accidents. So my kids are like, hey Dad, watch this, and they'll pull it up, and I'm like, no, I can't even see that, like, just get it away from me. There's definitely some mistakes that hopefully you don't make. The definition of pruning is it's the cutting or removal of branches or parts of a tree to improve the structure, health, or shape. You want to have a reason for what you're pruning, and it can be, you're shaping the tree, you're trying to promote certain types of growth or reduce certain types of growth. You're going to have a lot of different goals for yourself: eliminating hazards. If the tree's hanging over your house and stuff's been falling on your roof, that's a hazard. Increasing light penetration, that helps your fruit trees. Airflow, aesthetics, clearance. Several of you've probably gotten letters from the county saying we can't drive under your tree, or it's too close to the power lines. You may have had some of that. So these are all the reasons that people might prune. There might be a few others, but we run into these main ones as professionals. Preventative, a lot of times you can prevent a lot of problems pruning a tree when it's very young. We get called in oftentimes for trees that are problem trees that had structural problems very early, that had they been addressed, people wouldn't have roof damage, or people wouldn't have stuff breaking and falling off. Corrective, you've all seen the Idaho wind and what it can do, and these late snows that we get in the springtime. You've seen the damage that can do to trees and to property. Aesthetics, and then also your production with your fruit trees. Your proper pruning is important. Every cut you make can change something about the tree. Every cut you make needs to have a purpose. We tell our new guys that are training and starting to study to become arborists that you need to have reasons to make a cut, because if a homeowner comes out and says, why did you cut that here? And you say, I don't know, I just felt like it. It's not a good reason to make a cut. If you make an improper cut, decay is going to spread more rapidly. Trees have something called compartmentalization of disease and decay. If there's part of the tree that's dying, the tree will turn off that branch and it'll just die back to the trunk, and it'll compartmentalize that, and it's trying to keep the decay from getting into the main structure of the tree. So if you're making poor cuts, you can actually cause your tree to die faster. One time I had a buddy who, he called me and said, hey, I'm going to help a lady in our ward. She needs some trees removed or some branches so she can drive her car through the driveway. And he went over there to make the cuts. I told him how to do it properly, and there were a few old timers down there, just cut it! And he's up there making good cuts, and he's making proper cuts, and they were so frustrated at him because it took so long, but he was doing it properly so that it wouldn't injure her tree. So just cutting the tree is not always the best way to go. Best time to prune. One of Bob's favorite things to say is, best time to prune is when your saw is sharp. So if your saw is sharp, it's sharp today, go prune your tree. You could prune it yesterday. That's kind of the idea, because if you've pruned it in the past, you're preventing future problems. It also depends upon the goals and what your tree is, and what you're trying to do with those trees. And that'll make a little more sense as I get into this presentation. Your timing also plays a huge role. How many of you have ever said, I'm tired of raking all these leaves. I would rather not have all these leaves in September. Anybody ever had that experience? You're like, I have so many leaves in my backyard. There's a proper time to prune to prevent that. So your ornamental spring flowering trees and shrubs, you prune them after they bloom. If you prune them before they bloom, you've actually defeated the purpose of having the ornamental tree. You've knocked all the blossoms off, and so you kind of miss the sweet smell that you get from like your spring snow crab apples. And that's just a sad thing if you ruin your tree before it has a chance to flower and be pretty for you. Dormant and early spring pruning, it'll maximize new growth. So this time of year, trees are dormant. We are doing a lot of apple pruning. We're doing a lot of fruit pruning. But because we're pruning now, when it comes out of dormancy, the tree goes, ouch, I had a whole bunch cut off. I've got to grow and make up for it. And then you get these huge suckers that come out. And you want to do that with an apple tree, where you don't necessarily want to do that with your ash tree that's hanging over your house. So there's purposes for doing that. And also your greatest dwarfing effect, it usually occurs by pruning after your spring growth. So if you have a tree and you want to keep it small, in the springtime everything warms up, the water melts from the snow and it goes down into the ground, and now the tree takes all that new water in and all the nutrients, and that's when the explosion of growth happens, that spring flush. You want to prune it after that to keep it small, otherwise you've just pruned your tree and then the spring flush happens and it's like you never pruned it at all. Some species, maples and birches, they will drip sap. So if you have a birch or a maple over your patio and you want to be on your patio having breakfast and you prune it early spring, I don't know how many of us actually can eat on our patio in the early spring, maybe this year, but they'll drip sap. It's harmless, but it is a little sticky. In some cases, the birches actually have shown an increase in susceptibility to insects. Another thing you'll run into is your evergreen trees, your spruces, your pine trees. If you prune them in the heat of the summer, they're more susceptible to insects. We have whole forests in Island Park in Yellowstone that have been destroyed by these burrowing insects. The pine beetles, I'm trying to think of the scientific name, but we'll call them pine beetles. They can get into the tree easier because you've just created wounds. So you don't really want to prune in the middle of summer if you're worried about insects. How aggressively should you prune your tree? This is a great question, and we get asked that all the time. We'll go up and we'll climb trees. People will say, well, you didn't even do what I wanted. You pruned the tree, but it's it's not shorter. And we're not hedge trimming a tree. You know, we're not cutting it off 8 feet lower all the way around because that's not good for the tree. But if you cut off more than 25% of the foliage, you will either shock or kill your tree at any size. And that's foliage. That's not your wood that comes out of the tree. That's the leaf parts. The one thing that we tell people is with your apple trees and pear trees, you can go a lot more aggressive. You can actually get to 40% of your tree because you're trying to go for that sucker response, and they're a little more hardy that way. I wouldn't recommend doing that with your stone fruits though. So if you have plum trees, you have peaches, cherries, apricots, don't prune past the 25. You could kill your tree, especially in Idaho. Mature trees are less resilient. Your younger trees can take a lot more of a beating than your older trees can. And so that's one of the reasons you want to consider, you know, the age, health, stress level of the tree. If you have an apple tree that you've been fighting fire blight for years and you go super aggressive, you can really cause some damage to that tree. So there's a lot of things to take into looking at pruning your tree when it comes to the types. Pruning tools, there's a lot of different pruning tools you can use. Many of these you guys probably have. Hand pruners, loppers, pruning saw, pole saw, chainsaw. Avoid using head shears to prune a tree, and you want to keep them clean and sharp. This time of year when we're pruning fruit trees, we will actually spray our tools between every tree with isopropyl alcohol so as not to spread diseases like fire blight and funguses and things like that. So keeping it sharp means your cuts are going to be nice and straight, and you're not going to tear at all. Tears are bad, and I'll kind of show you why here. I don't really want to get too much into the anatomy of trees, but there's a lot of different things that you can see there. One of the most popular things we get asked to do is, can you top my tree? Just go, if I want my tree to be 20 feet shorter, just cut the top of it off. That's a really bad thing to do, with the exception of apple trees. If I do it as a certified arborist, I could lose my certification. If my competitor sees me climb one of your trees and top it, it is that bad, because it creates weak unions and a lot of suckering, and that's when you have tree branches fall out of your house. 5 years later, you'll have a branch that's 6 inches across and 20 feet long, and it'll fall, and you've created that problem by topping your tree. So that's one of the things that we tell people, and they're like, no, this was a thing. And that's pretty much what everybody knows about their big trees. Just top it, just top it. It's a very bad thing to do, so just keep that in mind. Types of proper cuts. There are right and wrong ways to cut trees. The two primary cuts we do are removal and heading cuts. And you want to make a removal cut just outside the branch collar. So I'll show you a picture of that here in a minute. The branch collar, it contains trunk tissue. If you make that into the tree too far, you are actually damaging the tree. And I'll show you what a flush cut looks like here in a minute. About a year ago, I came out of an early meeting at my ward, and I walked outside, and we had 2 linden trees, and I hadn't seen them when I walked in, but the sun was up now, and I looked, and somebody had decided to cut all the branches about yay high up. We had a couple little boys in primary that like to get out of church and go climb trees, and some good Samaritan thought, hey, I'm going to make it so these kids don't fall out of this tree. And they took about 40% of the foliage, and they flush cut that straight up, and those trees did not do well from it. So it's a real problem when you're cutting on trees. If you do it improperly, they died. We had to take them down, put new trees in. There's a process, and it's an art and kind of a science. So your principles here, you can see your branch collars. When you're doing a branch collar, there's a part that swells. In different trees, you can see it better than in other trees. You can see them in your birch trees, in your aspen trees, in your lindens, and in your ash trees. Some of the others may be a little difficult to see. So you want to do it at about like a 45-degree angle to the branch. And you're going to leave a little bit of a bump if you see with your hardwood, even with your conifers. There's a little bit of a bump there. And you want to cut it outside of that branch collar, because that's really part of the trunk that you're damaging. damaging if you do it inside there. That's the removal cut that you want to avoid. When you cut straight down through the limb, it's going to tear. This time of year especially, trees are hibernating, even with the warm weather we've had. We actually notice a difference between cutting a tree in the winter and in the summer. You get less of this in the winter, but it'll break. In the summertime, I've seen trees peel 2 or 3 feet, and it leaves a really nasty hole in your tree, and it's not good. So your removal cuts, you want to do what's called a 3-cut method, where you undercut it, and then you cut it, and then that part will actually fall away, and then you just have a short little nub to cut off. So you're actually making 3 cuts to make 1. And anytime it's a heavy piece of wood, if it's a 20-foot long branch, you undercut it, and then you cut just outside of it, the whole thing will just fall. If you're cutting a small, like a 1-inch branch, you can hold it and cut it, because then the weight of the tree branch won't cause it to tear. Any questions about the proper way to make those cuts?
Does it matter how many inches or?
It can. So the question is, does it matter how many inches out away from the tree? So with a bigger branch, I will go a little further out just because there's a lot of weight. And like I said, it can tear 3 feet down the trunk of the tree. If you're maybe 12 to 18 inches out, you're good. If it's a smaller branch that's 4 to 6 inches, you can do it maybe 6 to 12 away from it, just because you're not going to have as much weight. But that first cut there, the undercut, that's the most important cut, because it'll keep it from tearing, it'll keep it from peeling like that. And that number 2 cut, if you cut this side of it, it might still peel. You want to be on the outside on that top cut. Any other questions? So here's some good examples of a proper cut. You see it's outside the branch collar. There's a bit of a bump there, and it looks like a nub, but it's not. And what you see there is the tree will actually heel over. So now that you've seen this as you drive around town and as you go to different buildings, you'll actually be like, oh, somebody made a cut on that tree and it's healing over. You'll start noticing these things. That's what we want to see right there, because that's the tree healing over the wound. And big wounds on trees, if you're making a 12-inch cut on a tree to remove a limb, that tree will never heal from that. There will always be some of that dead, rotting wood that's exposed. Smaller trees will actually fill that hole in. And that's part of why older trees are worse to do that with, and you want to take care of your problems when your tree's younger. A reduction cut or a heading cut is the other type. And this is the alternative to topping. Topping is when you just go up and you just cut it. But you can do a reduction or a heading cut when you have a branch, a lateral that comes off that's at least the third of the size. When you make that cut to the third of the size, that limb that's left over can take all of the nutrients and energy that is coming up through the trunk. If you cut it off smaller than that, like if you cut it off to a bud, the whole part's going to sucker out, and then you're going to have the topping problem. So here's some good reduction cuts that you can see there. Now that branch that goes to the side will actually be the top of the tree or the end of that branch. Here are the poor pruning practices. And if any of you have done these, I don't mean to pick on you, but you're going to create some problems for yourself. Flush cutting, I kind of explained what that was when you cut a limb off. If you cut down the tree, if you cut down the branch instead of at that angle, rather than having a 4-inch wound, you now have an 8-inch wound or a 12-inch wound because you've made that wound bigger. It takes longer for it to heal over. Lion's tailing is when you take everything off of the branch except for what's at the tips, and I have some examples of that. Over pruning is when you go past your 25% that's suggested, and topping the tree, I've already spent probably enough time on that you're all scared of ever topping a tree, hopefully. So your flush cutting, you cut too close to the trunk inside the branch collar, it causes the tree to suffer permanent internal decay because you've made that wound so big that it just will never heal up. So this is what a flush cut looks like. This cut really should have been, I'm going to step out of the camera, but it really should have been this size, and instead it's this size, if that makes sense. Lion's tailing, you've taken everything off except for what's at the tip, and you want to leave some of your internal foliage. One of the problems we see, especially with fruit trees, is people will take everything that grows on the tree this high up. So now you have nothing to cut it back to. So if you have fruit trees and you've done that, and you get suckers that come out low, leave about 1/3 of those suckers. If they grow in a good direction, don't take them off, let them grow. They're there to replace when you want to cut the tree down. Because if you don't, and you're just leaving all your internal growth up here, eventually you won't be able to reach the fruit. And that's the idea, right? You want to reach the fruit for your apple trees, your plum trees, your peach trees, your cherry trees. And you don't want to have to climb on one of those ladders to have to do it. It's too dangerous. So here's an example of lion's tail. You notice there's nothing on that branch all the way out there. If that tree grows anymore, where's all the weight? It's out of the tips, and that's when branches break off. So you can't size reduce or weight reduce that branch safely. You have to remove that whole branch, and it really makes the tree look kind of ugly and not at all healthy. So over pruning we talked about. There's an example of over pruning. If you look there, you can see directly through that tree. That's not a good thing. Seeing a little bit of blue through your tree is okay, but if you can fly a drone through it, it's probably not a good thing. And then topping, that's kind of what it looks like when they sucker out. I have pictures on my phone that I carry with me just to show people the results of topping. One time we had a branch that was this big and it was topped 20 years earlier. They called us out to remove this tree because it was leaning over the house and had dropped a lot of branches, and the top of this was this big, and the branches coming out were like this, and they were 20 feet long, and they were being held by 3 inches of wood all the way across it. No wonder they were falling out, and they came down like spears and did roof damage. So topping is really bad for that reason, because it's really weak where they connect. They come out at the top of that, and it creates a lot of weak unions that are just not good for your tree or for anything under your tree. So you'll see this. Sometimes you'll see what's called pollarding. I think somebody did that out on Crowley. They have a bunch of ash trees and they cut it back to the same size. That's okay because it actually grows back, but they have to cut it off every year. So if you do this to your trees, for a fruit tree, that's a better thing. If I do it, it's a bad thing. But if you're doing the pollard where you cut it every year in the same spot, it'll create kind of a callus there where all the suckers come out. But that's what you want to avoid with your tree pruning. If you over prune, that's also a problem. Proper pruning techniques. You have your shade and ornamentals. You can structurally prune them so if they're growing in good directions and they don't have crossing and rubbing. You can crown raise. You can crown clean, which I'll show you some examples of that. Crown thin, size reduction, and restoration pruning. So here's an example of structural pruning. You have a whole lot of branches there, and if you notice the second picture, the branches that were internal, that were growing inside, are now gone and leaving space and air, and the ones that are growing outward. Some of your structural problems you'll see is a codominant. You want your unions to be a U shape. If you see them in a V shape, what happens is that bark will actually grow against each other, and it will push until one side will break off. So it doesn't even need the help from the wind. The largest bark inclusion with a codominant leader I've seen was 6 feet. And when we dropped that tree, it fell perfectly in half because they're not connected. So that's why somebody's put straps up there. And this here is not connected all the way down out of the picture. So that's what it looks like if you have a codominant or a bark inclusion. If you have that on a young tree, cut it now. Cut it now, let the tree grow in and fill in. Don't wait till it's a 12-inch trunk, because then you'll have a really bad bare spot in your tree, and it'll be really hard on the tree to recover. Crown raising is something most people want to do with their trees for lawnmower purposes, so you can walk under your tree and mow it without getting poked in the eye. And so basically what that is you're just raising it up. So if you notice, it's kind of hard to see, but those trees, they're not just cutting off all the branches up to 6 feet. They're leaving the bottom parts and they're cutting kind of the foliage off. So we had a guy one time at work who thought, oh, we're going to do a 2-foot crown raise on this spruce tree. Well, it had a codominant leader that was 6 inches from the ground, and when he cut it off, half the tree fell off. It was bad. So you don't want to just cut indiscriminately. You need to know where the limbs are going and where they're going to. Do I have enough time? I don't want to go over. Okay. Crown cleaning. This is what we clean for. When we go in and we do a crown thin or a crown cleaning, we look for broken branches. We look for crossing and rubbing. We size reduce. We take out diseased branches, and we weight reduce. So we're trying to thin it out by taking out the bad things. Water sprouts are the sprouts that grow straight up. You take those out unless they're growing in a good direction. That'll help your tree. This is kind of what a crown thin looks like. So you're taking out about a third, 25% of the tree, and that's your aftershock. You've taken out the internal stuff, you've taken out the dead stuff. The dead branches don't count towards your 25% because they're already dead. The tree's already discounted that. So here's what a good crown thin looks like. You can see the blue through it, but it's not so thin that you can, throw footballs and everything through that tree. Size reduction. This is one of the things that you will probably run into with power lines, keeping it away from your houses, keeping things away from where the UPS guy drives on your street. That tree has been cut down to good laterals, and so it's the right size. When the power company comes through and cuts your trees, they will just cut it. They just measure 8 feet away and they cut it. So you can make it look nice and you can do the reduction with that. Restoration pruning, you want to follow the rule of thirds. Cut it off to something that's a third of the size or larger when you reduce it. You want to correct problems with your tree. If you do this early, you've taken care of those problems. Here's an example of what that might be. Let's say you have a branch break out of your ash tree that's lining the street, and you start getting these little suckers. You can decide which ones to keep, and you can cut the branches so that your new leaders take over and be a little healthier, especially if it looks like it's going to be a weak union. You want to avoid that same issue that you run into with topping trees. And then here's an example of crown cleaning versus crown thinning, and then crown raising and crown reduction. So you can bring a tree down a little bit, you can bring a tree up a little bit, you can bring it in a little bit, but it's not going to be like you shrunk your tree in the wash. Sometimes people want their tree to go back to what it was 20 years earlier, and you're not going to get that back. Even with your size reductions, it's only going to be a 2 or 3 foot reduction, even when you're cutting out 6 to 8 foot branches. Fruit trees, this is probably what you guys wanted to know the most. Open center, vase shaped, it maximizes your light penetration. You can do that, or you can go to a central leader system. That's what you have for your branch stability. Here's kind of what you're looking at with your trees. Is the dotted lines are the ones you want to cut. You notice when it's really young, there's only like just a few cuts, and then it gets to be a little more and a little more and a little more as it gets bigger. And this is the ideal. This is kind of what you're aiming for with your tree pruning. Notice there's still internal branches that are low. They may be 2 or 3 inches long, but they're still there. So if you want to go with the central leader, here's your other option. You have the central, and it'll grow up and it'll get tall, and eventually that'll be taller than what you want to reach for. Most of the time we do the base shape, but you can do the same thing, cutting out, crossing and rubbing branches that grow in bad directions. And that's what it looks like. A lot of times this will be like your apricot and peach trees. Your stone fruits will look more like this. Just kind of in closing here, look at what your goals are before you prune your tree. Kind of have a plan. This is what I want out of the tree. The long term that we tell people isn't just 2 or 3 years. Trees can be around for 50, 100 years. You want to look at it, even if we may not be here, somebody's going to inherit that problem. If you top a tree, what's your goal? The tree's going to be around for a very long time. So keep that in mind as you do it. Some trees require a pruning program that takes a lot of years. You just got to be patient with it. The thing we tell our new pruners is, what's the difference between a good pruning and a bad pruning for trees? About a year, because they grow back. And especially if you prune aggressively, it's going to sucker out, and you just have to prune it again. So be patient with yourself, and when you're working with your trees, know that you are probably going to mess up, but it's okay, because we're professionals and we mess up. So you try not to, and then you go back and you fix it. Any questions? Yes.
So, you made reference to a branch being a certain diameter, and that if you cut it there, and you're trying to keep a lateral near the top that can absorb the new nutrients coming in there. My question on that was is the angle of connection. I understand that typically a 90-degree angle is a stronger connection with more folding wood than that tighter angle of something less than 90 degrees.
Yeah.
Can you comment on
So like what I was saying with the V-shaped, that can be a bark inclusion, but that's if there's a second one. If you're cutting it off, that branch will continue to grow, and that will scar over where you've cut. So yeah, if it's a third of the size, then it should be able to absorb that and should be able to grow. What you're trying to avoid is having a topping cut where it grows just out of the edge of the bark, because then it's only connected to there, and as it grows over the top where the cut was, it's not connected there. It's just growing outward over it.
So rule of thumb about a third of the size of you're looking for that lateral that's about a third of the size of the piece.
About a third of the size. Your apple trees, though, you can prune an apple tree back to a bud because you're looking to do that. But on your ornamentals, your spruce trees that maybe the top gets broken, you definitely want to try to get something that can absorb that.
Are apples first year wood? Do they fruit on their
Second.
Second year.
Well, the second year is where you get all your fruit.
Is the fruit.
But we thin them out. So even with your first and second year, we'll leave about 1/3. Because most of you who have apple trees have probably gone out and had to knock apples off so that your tree doesn't break. We just do that when we prune it. If you take out 2/3 of it or leave a third on it, you've already thinned it out, and your apples will be a lot larger. They're going to bring in the same amount of sugar, and it doesn't matter how much you've pruned it down to. But if you do prune a lot of those branches, those apples should be larger. So if you have a smaller apple tree and you're like, man, I wish I had more than like one bite of this tiny little apple, prune it aggressively and see what happens. Yes.
On my apple tree every year, there's just the top pieces that just shoot straight up, and I just always lop this off the same height. That doesn't matter.
No, that's perfect. We usually will count about 6 buds off and cut it to that same spot, and then you'll see it next year, and then you just cut below that the next year. And so, yeah, the apple trees can absorb that. Don't do it to any other trees, but apples and pears. Any other questions? Either you're asleep or I did a really good job. Yeah.
People are probably gonna throw stuff at me for asking this, but how much does it cost to have someone come through?
So it depends. My answer is it depends on how much it costs. If you have one apple tree and it's a small apple tree and we're there for a half hour, we might charge $120 for it. But if we're doing a whole orchard and we're there for half a day, it could be a couple grand. So it just depends upon how long it takes us. We do free estimates if you want us to. We also do consults. If you want to prune your own trees and you want us to come out and consult with you, we charge about $150 an hour to go consult with your trees. We'll prune with you. We'll tell you how to do it, and that'll save you thousands of dollars if you want to do the work yourself.
It's on a spruce tree or an evergreen, just say an evergreen.
If you sense that there's going to be a split leaf, typically then it's not just cutting a portion of the top, it's going back to about where the split's at
and going up an inch or two away from the collar or where they're at, cutting that off, rather than leaving part of the branch to continue to, because will it continue to try to compete with that?
Yeah, that's why they're called co-dominant. They are competing for being the apical merit.
So we'll move it back to,
and do it young. If you've just planted a spruce tree and you notice there's 4 or 5 tops coming out of it, cut all of them. Cut all of them either subordinate, which is a lower cut, or take them all right out, leaving the one to
so
grow.
you can do a subordinate cut and still have the same effect of altering that one to take off and control.
Yes.
You can do that.
In theory, you can. Sometimes the tree gets different ideas, and you'll have another one that'll come out and go, and you just subordinate that one as well.
Okay.
So, but do it when it's younger, because when you're doing it and it has an 18-inch trunk, that's really hard on the tree. And you don't want it to fall out of the tree when it has the 18-inch trunk and it's 60 feet tall, because whatever's underneath it is going to get hit with it.
And the time to prune is in the spring before the spring flush.
Yeah, with those, you don't have as much of a flush with your evergreens like you would with your fruit trees. But you still get yes. If you do it in the summertime, like July, August when it's hot, the tree will be lower with its sap content to kind of coat those insects. That's the tree's mechanism for stopping the internal bugs. Yeah.
Referencing pruning apple tree, if I understand correctly, you don't want horizontal branches on an apple tree, you want them more upward and vertical.
You want them to go outward. You don't want them to be so long that the fruit breaks limbs off. So we do 2 different types of cuts on apple trees when we prune them. We do a weight reduction cut, because we know that looking into the future, like I said, you have apples and leaves that are going to be on that tree, and if you've got a 20-foot branch, that's a lot of weight. It's like when you have a 5-pound weight here, and now that's 20 pounds of pressure on my spine if I hold it out here. And then when the wind blows the tree and it starts twisting, you've times that by 100, so now it's 200 times the weight. So that heavy stuff out there, you want to thin that out a little bit, leaving some of that internal. But you do kind of want them to go, you don't want them to go straight up, because you still want to be able to reach it. The ideal apple tree height is about 8 feet, so you can step on a step ladder, reach up and grab your fruit. Just 1 or 2 steps on a step ladder. Honestly, we probably have people in here who have trees that are taller than 8 feet that are apple trees, and they're just fine. But that's kind of the ideal that you want to aim for. So as it kind of goes up and outward, you're trying to prune so that it grows away from the center of the tree. So
This probably isn't a pruning question, but if you're growing apples on an apple tree and you have clumps of like 5, 10 apples, you have to do something to cut off so you don't have all these little apples. What do you do in that case?
So you can just pluck some of them off, keep the good apples, the ones that look good, the ones that are kind of meh, you can pluck those off as well. If you've pruned your tree, you'll have apple clumps, but that's okay. If you've done it aggressively, you don't have to thin it out as much. The danger with having too many apples is that the weight will break branches out of your apple tree, and then you've lost huge parts of your apple tree. I've seen that on family members' apple trees where they say, "Hey, come look at my apples. We got so many on here." I look at it and I'm like, yeah, you've lost that branch and that branch because they're on the ground, or worse, they've had to prop them up with boards. You need to cut those back quite aggressively if it's that heavy. One last thing about your fruit trees. Most of your fruit trees will have an every other year cycle, and if you've never pruned your tree, it's not going to grow fruit. My neighbor had a plum tree, and she was like, "Man, we've had this plum tree for 20 years, and we've never had a single plum grow on it." I said, "Well, call us, we'll come out to your house." We went and cut on her tree, and that next fall, guess what? She had plums all over. So if you're not pruning your fruit trees, they will stop producing fruit. They can actually stop. They don't have to, but they can. And so you do want to prune it so that it will actually you're actually trying to shock the tree to make it sucker out, to make it panic so that it produces fruit. Fruit is the tree's way of proliferating, of surviving. And so when you're pruning your trees, you're scaring the crud out of the tree that it's going to die, and that's why it produces fruit. So it's kind of a funny way to look at it, but that's what happens. Did I answer your question? Any other questions? Yes.
I wanna know,
Like for our area, from a professional standpoint, as far as like shade and removals go, is there certain trees that you would suggest that just stay away from that don't live where you are?
Yes. We have a lot of nurseries that will give you maple trees. There are some maples that do okay. They're not a native Idaho tree. And just like we heard in the gardening, your silver maples, the leaves will turn yellow. They're iron deficient. We don't have the iron in the soil. People will plant a silver maple, they'll grow for 10, 15 years, and then the tree dies and gets insects and has these yellow leaves, and people are like, wow, what's going on with my tree? It's not native to Idaho. Your iron's gone out of the soil. You'll either have to give that maple iron shots or remove it. I have seen 60-foot tall silver maples. Somehow they survive. I don't know if the homeowner just put iron in their regular fertilizer to the point where it stayed alive. Your birch trees have about a 30-year life expectancy. Don't plant a birch in your yard. I'm sorry if you have, the birch will grow, it'll look beautiful, it'll be nice, and then it'll just die. And so that's another issue. The other tree that we're seeing a lot of that we're having problems with right now are ash trees. Every HOA in town wants people to plant an ash tree because they look pretty, but we're seeing a lot of insect problems with them. And we have emerald ash borer in a couple of states over Washington and Oregon, and it's only a matter of time. When it hits Idaho Falls, we're talking total devastation of our ash population. Because that's what it's done in Pennsylvania, that's what it's doing in Oregon right now. So there are some trees. If you talk to somebody at a nursery, sometimes they're very knowledgeable, sometimes they're the high school kid that just has the summer job. So make sure you know who you're getting, because they'll say, oh yeah, these trees are pretty, plant them.
so what would you recommend? I've got a brand new yard.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out,
So-
longevity-wise, what I put in.
So crab apples are real hardy and real pretty, and if you ever have problems with them, you can prune them like an apple tree, and you can make them smaller. You do have issues where you could get fire blight. If the neighbors have fire blight, the insects will carry it to your tree, but you have to just cut it out and be vigilant. They're a real pretty tree, like a spring snow crab apple. For ornamental, I like linden trees. Linden trees do very well around here. Honey locust trees do okay if you have a spot where they're not getting blasted by the winter winds. But you also want to make sure you're not planting too close to your house with a lot of these trees. And people do that, especially with newer homes. Your landscapers will go, oh, this is a foot of space, we can put a tree here. And then 20 years later, they call us to go remove the pine tree that they planted 3 feet from your window. So there are a lot of trees you can plant. There's a lot of things. If you want a consultation on what you want to plant, you can also call a company, a tree company, certified arborist. You can call us, whoever you need to talk to. But do some planning before just saying, oh, this is pretty and this is pretty. I've seen people plant like Japanese maples. They're all over Boise. They look beautiful. You plant them here, they're going to die. The wintertime's too hard on them. So there's a lot of options that you have. Every arborist has their personal favorites. I told you mine, your lindens, your spring snow crab apples, your honey locust trees. But, and if you want something that's really low maintenance, plant an evergreen. Yes.
So what about cedar, like the Dora cedar or something like that? I'm talking about zones, 6 by 4, I think this is 4 something. Will that the Dora cedar survive?
I don't see a lot of cedars around. I see more junipers. If you want something that's cedar-like, plant a juniper tree. So, and a lot of times you'll see those zones. I personally have planted peach trees that should be zoned for here. Didn't survive.
So on the spruces, you go on Blue Lady Way, they have a common recycling, there's the needle caps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, is Norway and black spruce more cast resistant than blue. Because blue, I've seen it, and I know the idea is that, you know, try not to get the water to splash on the tree to spread the spores.
Yeah.
But your thoughts on that?
We actually have a lot of false needle cast here. It's
A
not
lot of what?
false needle cast. It's
Oh, tell me
we
about
don't
that.
we don't see the needle cast that they do in other warmer climates. Needle cast, you'll have the needles that will die internally, and you'll still have green out on the tips. What you're seeing around here most of the time that people are calling needle cast is the tips are dying in red, and there's a lot of reasons for that. It could be a fungus, could be an insect, could be like spider mites. There's a lot of things, but we've been down to every year our arborists go down to a green conference put on in Salt Lake from the University of Utah and Utah State, and they're like, we don't have needle cast here. Needle cast happens in other.
Well, I mean, I've seen it, and
So-
it turns the needles purple. You know, you see that purple cast, and then they start to fall and spread. So I just was curious as to how.
You're seeing a fungus instead of just the needle cast.
Well, okay, so
It's a different
help me
type.
with that. So what do
So-
you, if you want to call it fungus, then what do you do with that? You
So-
prune it out, or you just cut the tree down and burn it?
You want to cut that out, and with that in particular, there's nothing you can do to deal with it once it's in the tree other than cut it out. But you can spray an antifungal beforehand.
Every year, yeah, okay. All right, but I mean, you're not suggesting that one spruce species or another is necessarily more resistant.
They all have different funguses and insects that they're prone to.
And then woolly aphids, no problems up here with woolly aphids.
We do have aphids, but I don't know if they're woolly or not because the insects are not my specialty.
Oh,
We treat the insecticide with the trees for a broad variety. And so for us, we don't see that it matters as much to know exactly what the insect is because what we do is a broad spectrum and it takes care of it. So
My question has to do with suckers, that you talked about suckers on the tree.
Mhm.
What about suckers that come up from the river? I got some aspen trees that put 40, 50 suckers
Mhm.
all the way up the tree.
just cut them off at the ground. Don't poison them because if you have suckers that come out from the ground, they're connected. The trees have of the same type have an internal network where the roots are all connected. So a lot of people will be like, I don't know why my trees die and I was spraying these suckers over here. Well, they're connected and you've poisoned your tree. So cut them off. And aspen trees just do that. Poplar trees do that.
Someone recommended using sucker punch on those things.
Yeah, I would just cut them off.
Problem I have with mowing them is now you have about 1 or 2 inch stub that's really hard. So if you have kids running through the air, it's difficult to walk around.
And you can shave part of the top of that off, but you don't want to be cutting through big roots. So if you have like a hatchet, you can hack that off so that it's below the grass line. I've done that. Yeah. Yes.
If I'm spraying for weeds,
Mhm.
how far away from trees should I stay?
So you want to be careful definitely with overspray. If you're doing it near trees on a windy day, it doesn't matter how far away, you could still hit your tree. But you want to stay a pretty good portion away. What we usually do is take the inches of diameter in the trunk, times it by 8, and stay that far away. So if you have a 24-inch trunk, you're staying 8 feet away from your tree or more. Or 12 inch, you're staying.
Can you
So
say
it's-
that the distance
So
between
it's
the
times
spray
8. It's the distance of diameter in the trunk at chest height. If it's 12 inches, so it's 1 foot. You want to 8 times that. So I'm staying 8 feet away if it's a 12-inch trunk, which is hard because you want to have the area around the tree clear from weeds, but you really shouldn't spray in there because it'll absorb it. Everybody's kicking themselves now for spraying too close. My neighbors had that happen. A farmer was like, yeah, I came and sprayed your ditch bank, and they had this huge, it was a box elder tree, and the tree started, huge parts of the tree started dying because he just sprayed the herbicide. So you want to be careful with it.
What's a linden? You kept referring to a linden.
A linden tree?
Yeah.
They're a real pretty tree that grows out, and they have limbs that will kind of go colander shaped, and you've probably got a bunch of them in your neighborhood. But it has kind of a what was that?
They smell really good.
They do. They
Do
do.
they have pretty big size leaves?
Yes. Yeah, they're kind of a bigger, like a spade-shaped leaf. And yeah,
We're looking for a kind of shade.
it's
We got a
nice
picture
shaped
that
shaped tree.
everyone can see.
Oh, yeah.
Not right?
Looks like
Yeah, it has the right structure, but yeah, you can always just search linden trees. They're really pretty, really good shade trees, and they're really easy to prune and get to shape the way you want. Like I said with the others though, look for your structural issues because they will have some of those codominants. You want to pick out the right tree at the nursery so that you're not just taking what happens to be there. Somebody said they were really good at that earlier. Somebody said they were really good at picking out trees and shrubs. Was that you? Or, so it is an art. You don't want to, if the tree looks flat like it's been in a book, you don't want to take that tree because now you're going to have to do a lot of shaping it to get it to go where you want it to go. You want something that's nice and balanced.
I thought I was good until I took this class.
The good news is you can fix it. Like I said, you can do a haircut on your tree and make it grow back. So I see another hand back there. Did you have a question? All right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Are we excited for this? We'll just close with the prayer, I guess. You guys know what to do, right? We've felt the Spirit, maybe whisper or tell us 1 or 2 or 10 things or 100 things we need to do. Now we just gotta act on it, right? And then in September, October, we're gonna have Laura come inspect all the gardens for all your addresses, and we're gonna take pictures and throw them up on the board. So, I'm just kidding. I've asked my son, Elder Johns, to say the prayer, and we'll finish there.
Heavenly Father, thank you for this Sabbath day and the chance we've had to be here tonight to listen to these presentations. We're grateful for the Spirit and the chance we've had to think of thy Son Jesus Christ today. Please bless us in our efforts as we strive to be prepared and please help us to come closer to thee. We're grateful for thee and all thy blessings and say these things in the